Hey, if you're thinking about stepping up your live streaming game and you're not sure whether a hardware switcher is worth the cash, I've been there. I spent a weekend setting up a small production rig for a local theater group, and I ran into all the same doubts about cost versus benefit. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The first thing I noticed when I pulled the ATEM Production Studio 4K out of its box was how much space it demanded. It's a rack-mountable unit, so you either need a 19-inch rack or a sturdy shelf that can hold a 2U chassis plus a power strip. That's not a problem if you already have a rack in a control room, but for a creator working out of a home office it means buying an extra piece of furniture just to make the switcher sit properly. Once it was plugged in, the real work began, wiring all the cameras, graphics computers, and audio mixers. The 4.6G HDMI inputs are a blessing for anyone who already has SDI-ready cam gear, because SDI can run long distances without signal degradation. For HDMI-only users, the 4 HDMI ports are handy, but you'll quickly find yourself buying a couple of HDMI to SDI converters if you want to keep cable runs tidy. In practice, my theater crew ended up with a mix of SDI and HDMI, and the extra adapters added both cost and a tiny bit of latency that you have to account for when you're doing live cuts. What I liked most about the unit is the built-in LCD screen. It's not a full-size monitor, but it gives you instant visual feedback on which source is live, what transitions are cued, and the current audio levels on the XLR in/out. For a small crew that can't afford a dedicated video monitor, that screen replaces a separate reference monitor and cuts down on the number of cables you need to run to a control desk. The downside is that the screen is a bit dim in a well-lit room, so you still want a dedicated monitor if you're working in a bright studio. The software control app is where the ATEM really shows its depth. You can run the switcher from a laptop, map keyboard shortcuts, and even create macro sequences for complex cuts. In my testing, the software was stable, but the learning curve is steep if you've never touched a Blackmagic console before. There's no one-click wizard, you have to manually assign each input, configure audio routing, and set up downstream keys if you want to overlay graphics. That level of detail is great for a production that needs precision, but it can feel overkill for a streamer who just wants to switch between two cameras. Audio handling is another practical consideration. The two XLR in/out ports let you bring in a balanced mic or feed a program output to an external recorder without any extra interface. That's a solid advantage for churches, schools, or any event where you need clean stage mic audio. However, there's no built-in audio mixer, so you'll still need a small audio console or a DAW to blend multiple microphones, music tracks, and sound effects. If you were hoping the ATEM would be an all-in-one audio-video solution, you'll be disappointed. Now let's talk about the downstream video outputs. The unit offers 6 outputs, which sounds generous, but 5 of them are essentially copies of the program feed. The extra outputs are useful if you have multiple displays or a separate recording device, but you can't send different sources to each output simultaneously. That means you can't, for example, send a clean feed to a recording system while sending a graphics overlaid feed to the main screen without using an external encoder. For many small productions that's fine, but larger broadcasts that require separate clean and graphics feeds will need an additional downstream keyer or encoder box. So who should actually buy the Production Studio 4K? If you're running a multi-camera event, think a school play, a live-streamed conference, or a small-scale sports broadcast and you already have SDI-compatible cameras or are willing to invest in converters, this switcher gives you professional-grade routing without the price tag of a full broadcast rack. It also shines for creators who need reliable 4K output, built-in audio XLR, and the ability to store macro cuts for repeatable shows. In short, any production that values stability, low-latency switching, and the option to expand into more complex workflows will get real value here. On the other hand, if you're a solo streamer who only switches between 2 webcams, or a hobbyist who's happy with software solutions like OBS, the ATEM is probably more than you need. The upfront cost, the rack space, and the time you'll spend learning the control software.